Okay, so here's a short video that I'll try and make it short. But I don't know how I stumbled onto this, but this is the Practical Oscillator Handbook, Irving Gottlieb. I think it's from like 97, somewhere around there. Yeah, 1997. So really, I mean, I should probably like read this whole book. I don't know how much I'll actually read of it, but this is interesting and I think good stuff. But I want to just highlight one paragraph in here, and it concerns negative resistance devices. So if you've been following at all on this channel, you know that I'm pointing out that resistance is the single greatest parameter affecting Q factor, or how damped or undamped your oscillations are between a capacitor and an inductor. So just to drive that point home, the Q factor will, this is all other things, you know, that you haven't ran into other issues. If you run into other issues, then those begin to impact what's going on. But assuming you haven't run into other issues, Q factor improves by the square root of the capacitance. The smaller the capacitance, it'll improve by the square root. It'll improve by the square root of the inductance. The larger the inductance, it'll improve by the square root of the inductance. It improves directly, one for one, with resistance. So you have the resistance, and it's not a square root improvement. So if you could have negative resistance, then that would be really good for an oscillator, wouldn't it? But it's hard to understand what the heck they're talking about with negative resistance, because they don't say it clearly. And it's like, is it actual negative resistance? Because if you have negative resistance, then your oscillator would be self-sustaining. So again, I haven't read this book, but this is one like I want to read parts of, and I think I should read a lot of it because it's very practical, you know, operating MOSFETs. You know, the tunnel diode, it's a negative resistance diode from what I hear. And you know, it's like, how the heck do you use it? And here's different oscillators: Hartley oscillator, this oscillator, that Colpitt's oscillator. Okay, so let's just go to that thing on negative resistance. So the little couple pages, where is it? Negative resistance devices. As I said, there's just one paragraph I want to show you there. So this is just two paragraphs, but let's go through this from Dr. I suspect Gottlieb. Negative resistance devices, a family of important oscillation-provoking devices represented by the so-called negative resistance elements. Feedback oscillators, phase shift, spark gap oscillators. They're not negative resistance per se. They're not of the negative resistance variety. And then, you know, they don't really say it clearly what it is. Well, they say that a decrease in voltage across the element produces an increase in current through the element, or vice versa. So that's interesting, but it's not like, what does that actually mean? And then he also goes to say, we see that such relationships are contrary to what we would ordinarily expect from ordinary Ohm's law conduction. So when you have negative resistance, it's not following Ohm's law. Now we get to the good stuff. When such an element, negative resistant element, is operated in parallel with an LC tank circuit, it is actually possible to cancel the dissipative losses in the tank. So it's, well, what does that actually mean? So that means that there's sustained oscillations. They don't diminish with time. But not only that, I mean, why would it just go, say, if you start at 10, negative 10, 10, negative 10, why wouldn't it go 10, negative 10.5, 11, negative 11.5. And so he goes on to say here, sustained oscillations build up in an LC tank. Now, there's a little hedging there. Like, what does that mean? That, oh, it just sustains at 10, 10, 10, negative 10, 10, negative 10. Or by build up, does he mean the oscillation goes? Because you can kind of see what happens if by build up he means the oscillations increase in amplitude. That would mean you would put 10 volts into the cap, let it run for a while, and you get 20 or 50 or 100 volts out of the cap. Hence my interest in negative resistance as it relates to an LC tank circuit. So what else does he say? Let's finish this out. So just to wrap this up, so he's saying when you have negative resistance in parallel with an LC tank circuit, sustained oscillations and they build up. We see that in both the mathematical and the practical sense. The term negative resistance is quite descriptive. Looking at the phenomena from another angle, we see that if ordinary or positive resistance dissipates power, our negative resistance must provide power. This it does. So that's really all I wanted to bring to people's attention. That I'd heard about negative resistance, and it's like, what exactly are they getting at? Is that just a cute term? And this person spells it out. I mean, he's not exactly being shy here. He's saying when you have negative resistance with an LC tank circuit, the oscillations become self-sustaining. Just as I pointed out in a previous video, that they have these new silicon carbide MOSFETs, and either it's negative resistance or the resistance is so low that they have a problem with it self-sustaining. They shut it off and it just keeps oscillating. And well, you need to put in a 5 ohm. We've decided a 5 ohm resistor. They never think about actually doing anything with it. But you can think of plenty you can do with the self-sustaining oscillation, either if it's growing or if it's just constant. Like goes 10, you get the magnetic field there, negative 10. Use that as a pulse for a pulse motor. Now you're negative 10, pulse it again, you're at 10. So that's why I just wanted to bring this to light, that again, it's not entirely hidden. It's not even that hidden at all, that you can have these self-sustaining oscillations in LC tank circuit. Now, the best I've gotten to is 95, 96% back, and I'm still working on that, but I want to look at negative resistance. As I said, who knows when I'll get to it, but hopefully, at some point. A tunnel diode is a negative resistance element, and he's got a little write-up on a tunnel diode, so I haven't read it yet, but I want to wrap this up now to keep it short. But isn't that curious? Okay, bye y'all. Okay, I wanted to wrap it up. I just can't. I spent 2 minutes on this, and I was like, that's pretty darn interesting what he just said. I'm spending more on this. It's like this is like a Rosetta Stone. So now he's talking about the tunnel diode, and he's saying, let me back out, direct capability of inducing oscillation in a tank circuit from a practical viewpoint. This provides the most illuminating demonstration of the principle of negative resistance. Recall we had just gone over where he said earlier that negative resistance leads to self-sustaining oscillation. But the most incredible thing here, he's not like, here's circuit diagrams. He's just saying this is a free energy handbook. This is incredible. I'm blown away. So, he just said negative resistance gives you the self-sustaining oscillations. And now he's going into detail about tunnel diodes and how to set it up. This needs to be read. And he's going into different oscillation modes of the tunnel diode. It's not, he's going down into the weeds with it. It's not like you just stick the diode there and away it goes. I'm blown away. And then, so I was like, who is this Irving Gottlieb guy? And so, like, here's all the books he wrote. I think he was, I want to say University in Pennsylvania or somewhere around there. I can't remember now where it was. But then I saw this one. That one was from like 1990. This one, and it's also freely available online. This one is entitled Basic Pulses. So what the heck is he talking about there? And we just go in the preface. Let me find it for you. I mean, let's back out for a minute. What have I been showing in the spreadsheets? That the Q factor improves as the ratio, leaving aside other parameters, the ratio of how fast your pulse is over the resistance divided, the inductance divided by the resistance. What do you hear John Bedini talking about? You know, fast pulses. What do you hear Tom Bearden saying? You know, sharp transient. Now here this guy just wrote a book on pulses. You know, basic pulses. I mean, what is he talking about? Is he talking about electric pulses? He's talking about the same darn thing. And when you read this in light of what we just saw from the book from the 1990s, you know, talking about self-sustaining LC tank circuits, he's talking about the same stuff as Bearden and Bedini. And let me see if I can just find a good line or two here. Now, you know, pardon me, this is all I've read of this is this few paragraphs of the preface. But he's saying here, you know, traditional concepts of pulses or non-sinusoids have developed. The non-sinusoid of electric power occurs too infrequently or with too meager consequences to merit much more than passing attention. Unfortunately, this situation is at odds with conditions generally extant in electronic circuits. Such circuits are often dependent upon the unique characteristics of wave shapes other than the sinusoid. And, you know, he's going on about that. Accordingly, this book inverts the outmoded convention. It is now the sine wave, which is recognized as the secondary wave shape as opposed to the pulse. So I'm not trying to make too big a deal about this yet because I haven't read the book. But what it sure looks to me is this guy in the 1950s, and keep in mind what I just showed those couple experts, you know, on the tunnel diode and the LC tank circuit, you know, what he's saying there in light of this book. This guy wrote a book on the radiant spike, okay? He wrote a book on the radiant spike in the 1950s. So this is going to be worth reading. And both of these are available freely online. You can look them up. I mean, there's the thing there, but you can find them easily. And the other one, I mean, here's the library. So I'm looking forward to reading that. So now I really got to shut up or this is going to be an hour video again.